Okay, good evening, everybody. Hello, welcome back, holy brothers and sisters, to Shiur number 20 of Chayei Moharan. As a reminder, this series of shiurim is dedicated in memory to my grandparents, Menachem, Dovid Zvi and Illana Basof. May the neshamas have the highest of aliyahs. A quick recap. Last week in Shiur number 19, we saw how Rabbi Menachem endured fierce opposition from the Shpala Zeta. We're going to see a little bit more of that this week as well. With remarkable humility and silence, Rabbi Menachem faced this opposition, and he chose Shalom and he chose Emunah over any sort of retaliation. We also learned that Rabbi Menachem's silence wasn't weakness, it was deep trust in Hashem, a living example of what we can say from Tehillim. And also, you might recognize this phrase from the tefillas that we say for Eretz Yisrael, but it's all about Hashem helping us in our struggles. Hashem yilachem lachem latem tacharishin, that comes from the Torah. That Hashem will fight for us and we will remain silent. So, even in rejection, Rabbi Menachem entered Breslov during Elul, the month of tshuva and mercy, and this symbolized the Yerida Letzorach Aliyah, that you have to sometimes go down in order to reach the higher heights, and the Yerida is only to get to that high point. We also learned how those descents can become the very springboard for our greatest ascents. And Rabbi Nachman's example taught us how we can also, when we're facing resistance, we can face it with dignity, with emunah, and with strength. So, for this week, last minute, I decided to change things a little bit up. So, instead of my original plan of doing 2 lessons in Chayei Moharan of Kuf Chaf Gimel, that's 123, and Kuf Chaf Daled, 124, I'm going to be a little ambitious tonight, so I hope you'll bear with me on this one. We're going to attempt to do 3 lessons, 3 paragraphs of Chayei Moharan, because I feel they flow really nicely into each other. They're all pretty short, and I feel like there's a nice message and something really practical that we can tie in from all 3 lessons. And that's going to take us to a really good place for the following week, where we're going to do 2 lessons in Mirz Hashem, which will end off this chapter, or this section of Chayei Moharan, where we learned about Rabbi Menachem's birthplace, his residence, and his travels. And that will get us into the portion which discusses Rabbi Menachem's trip to Eretz Yisrael. So that is the plan for tonight's shiur and for next week's shiur, God willing. So without further ado, let's embark on this exciting journey that we have planned for tonight. And I hope there'll be something for you to take away that you can apply into your own spiritual and physical lives. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, writes Reb Nosson, Koidem shenasa lebarditchev kibetz minyan asara nashim. So, when Rabbi Menachem, before he traveled to the city of Barditchev, he gathered 10 men, as we know, as a minyan. He gathered 10 people, and what did he do? V'tan lifnehem im habal davar. He argued, and he created a disagreement with what's known as the Baldavar, which is a nicer way of calling the Satan, the evil inclination, the one, the being, if you want to call it, that is there to be able to detract us sometimes from, but it seems like he's detracting us, but he's actually pushing us further to reach our spiritual goals. So, Rabbi Menachem created this meeting with the evil one, the Satan. Ve'eni yodea heitev inyan zeh al buryoi. Rabbi Nosson writes that he doesn't exactly know the details of what happened in this incident, but va'amar sheme'az v'hala kol ma sheroitze lases maniach atzmai habal davar la'arkoi l'rachboi l'kalkaloi. Any sort of path, or from that time on, whatever Rabbi Menachem himself wanted to accomplish, the evil one, the Satan, gave himself free rein to be able to travel the length and breadth of the entire universe in order to try and get in Rabbi Nachman's way from achieving any of these spiritual goals. So this is a really, really wild result of this argument that Rabbi Nachman had with the Satan. And therefore, as a result of this, it was very difficult for Rabbi Nachman to try and achieve the spiritual things that he wanted to, because he had given the evil one free rein to go and try and get in his way of what he was trying to achieve. But nevertheless, Rabbi Nachman said that with Hashem's help, he was still able to achieve the things that he wanted to achieve, because when you have Hashem on your side and you're filled with emunah and bitachon, you can still achieve really massive feats. And Reb Notzon writes that anyone who's worthy of becoming a follower of Rabbi Nachman can see something like this. I know from my own personal experience, when there's spiritual things that I'm trying to achieve, obviously I will be faced with resistance. That's just the nature of how Hashem set up the world. And I'm sure you watching this year have faced similar struggles, especially when it comes to doing spiritual things and following the guidance of Rabbi Nachman for, let's say, his spoidus, if you want to give a good example, because that's one of Rabbi Nachman's famous teachings, when trying to set time each day to go and speak to Hashem. Initially, when we're trying to get in the zone or apply that as a new habit within our lives, that can be a really challenging thing, because Rabbi Nachman has set that all up for us from his own personal argument with the Satan. So he's created that infrastructure that creates this resistance from us starting to create such a new habit. But once you get into the zone, you break that resistance, you reach that new level of that aliyah after you're going through that Yerida, then you've broken that, and then you're able to achieve that new thing that you're trying to take on, if that was a spoidus, for example. So, Rabbeinu zal shum menucha kol yamav afilu rega achas. And Rabbi Nosson writes that Rabbi Nachman, he did not have a single amount of rest in all of his days, not even for a moment, because he was constantly trying to take new things on and achieving great spiritual feats, not only for his own spiritual standing, but for his followers as well. And why? Because he was constantly fighting this war of Hashem every single moment, and that was whether his followers, like I mentioned, or for us. And this suits the quote that Rabbi Nachman said, that "for I am the elder of the side of holiness." And this is something that he was trying to apply to himself through all the days of his life. Now, in the Breslov Research version of tzaddik, which is page, I forgot to mention that at the beginning of this year, we're on page 57, there's an editor's note, and this does not appear in the Hebrew version, which is Kuf Nun Beis. So when I was preparing for this year, I noticed this section in English, and I thought I would take the time to actually read it, because it's quite a fascinating account, and it's very much related to this paragraph, but also the paragraph before that we learned last week about the Shpola Zeta. So I'm going to just take the time to read that, so you can sit back and enjoy and listen to this section, and then as soon as the section's over, we'll get back into the Hebrew and discussing a little bit more of how we can apply tonight's teachings. So writes here in tzaddik, this is a letter from the editor, this is an editor's note. He says, I heard that on one occasion, Rabbi Nachman and the Shpola Zeta were brought together. As everyone hoped the peace could be made between them, the Shpola Zeta turned to the Rebbe, and he asked him, how is it possible that an old man like me, with no teeth, could want strife? He even took Rabbi Nachman's hand and placed it in his mouth to prove him that he hadn't any teeth. But I would like to ask you about a number of things you said, continued the Shpola Zeta. Is it not true that you claim there's another Zlatopolia, the Zeta's hometown, in heaven? The Rebbe answered emphatically, "Why? This is precisely what our sages teach. Great cities and fortresses in heaven." This is from Devarim. "Just as there are cities down below, so there are cities up above." That's from the Gemara in Tanis. "Then tell me this," insisted the Zeta. "Did you not say that when you were in Zlatopolia, you were rectifying the sins of Yeravam, the son of Nevat?" "Yes," the Rebbe replied, and then related this teaching about remedying the sin of idol worship, atoning for the Jews, having exclaimed, "These are your gods, O Israel." By fulfilling, these are the journeys of the Jewish people. Finally, the Shpola Zeta insisted, "Is it true that you claim that you have been to the palace of Mashiach? And what about it? Perhaps you were there and did not find me," countered Rabbi Nachman. "But since you are already asking," he continued, "if you come to my house and join me in a cup of tea or coffee and publicly announce that you retract what you said about me and regret the conflict it caused, I will explain the matter and its deeper meaning." To this, the Shpola Zeta said that he would first have to go home and then come to the Rebbe later on. As the Zeta departed, the Rebbe heard him say to himself, "And how would I look into the eyes of my wealthy supporters if I were to make peace with them?" Rabbi Nachman concluded by saying, "If he had listened to me and come to my house, there might have been peace between us, but now he will certainly not make peace with me. He will carry on with the conflict. Still, be this as it may, I am not at all afraid of him." Sorry, that was a tricky one to read. "He's already shown me that he has no teeth." This ties in with what the Rebbe told in the story of the spider and the fly, about the enemies of the mountain whose teeth fell out and they unsuccessfully tried to ascend the mountain. Quick anecdote: if you're looking for more shiurim on the story of the spider and the fly, or some more writings, I highly recommend checking out Reb Joey Rosenfeld, who's actually teaching that story at the moment. So I'll try link it in the YouTube description and in the Spotify description. And if you're watching the recording on Instagram as well, I'll try link it there too. Continue on from what's written here. On his last Rosh Hashanah in 5781 or 1810, when delivering the lesson, Sound the Shofar, reproof, that's in Likutei Moharan 2, lesson 8, the Rebbe coughed up a great amount of blood. Afterwards he said, "I have such an enemy. His burning anger against me can be cooled only when he sees my blood." Reb Nosson adds, but he did not say who this enemy was. So, to make sense of all that, if you could hold on for just 2 minutes, or I would say maybe a little bit longer than 2 minutes, because what we're about to learn in the next paragraphs is actually, I feel, really going to explain what we just read from this excerpt here, to try and understand a little bit more about this argument that the Shpola Zeta had and the claims he was making against Rabbi Nachman. So just hold on to that, because we will get there very, very shortly. So until then, let's just add one more thing from this next paragraph before we do so. So, Koidam Shenasa Liberdich. Sorry, that was the earlier paragraph. B'Shabbos Chanukah, Tov Kuf Samach Tes, Shahaya Samach Libi Asay Melemberg. In the year Tov Kuf Samach Tes 5569 or 1808, this was in wintertime, Shahaya Samach Libi Asay Melemberg, which was close to the time that Rabbi Nachman entered the city of Lemberg, Kibikayet's Tov Kuf Samach Ches Ha'avar Bal Melemberg Lebesoy, because the Rebbe had come back from Lemberg the previous summer. And then that Chanukah, Amar HaTorah Hamascheles Yemei Chanukah Heim Yehoidah. Because that year, in that Chanukah, Rabbi Nachman taught the beginning of the lesson, which is known as Yemei Chanukah, which is a day of holiday, a day of great Thanksgiving. If any of you are part of Koilel Torah's Chaim around Hanukkah time, this year they were teaching this lesson. I myself have learned this lesson, Likutei Moharan. It's mamish, a really, really beautiful lesson from Rabbi Nachman. It's about, there's so many deep topics that has to do with like Thanksgiving and the miracle of childbirth and Shabbos, and it's so deep. If you want to learn a bit more, there are lessons on our own YouTube channel that you can check out from Rabbi Avram Gisselson, my Rebbe. I highly recommend learning this lesson of Likutei Moharan. It is mamish life-changing. And this is Likutei Moharan Tinyana, the second part of Likutei Moharan, and it's lesson 2. That's Siman Beis. Va'az tziva lezamer al hashulchan. So then what happened after Rabbi Nachman taught this lesson? He then instructed all that were there to sing Shir Hamalis LeDavid Lulei Hashem Shahai Elanu. He instructed them to sing Psalm 124. That's Kuf Chaf Dalid. It goes, a song of ascents of David. Had not Hashem been for us, that Yisrael now say. This is really beautiful Tehillim. It's said very often before Shil Shoyim and Shachris. It's a beautiful, beautiful Tehillim from David HaMelech. V'zimru lefanav zeh hamizmor b'leil Shabbos kama pamim ein misbar. And they also sang this psalm over and over again on that Friday night at the Shabbos table. V'gam pam achas b'hiyossi yoshev b'med v'defka. And one time when they were sitting in Medvedevka, when Rabbi Nachman was staying there, Hayamazamer Gam Kain Hamizmor, they also sang this chapter of Tehillim at that time, Kamapam, and several times they sang this. I tried looking up a tune from Breslov to see if there was a specific tune from Rabbi Nachman. I have yet to find it. Perhaps someone watching might be able to comment below. I will keep looking to see if perhaps there is a Breslov tune for this Tehillim. But until then, I have not yet heard one. So what happened? That time when he was in Medvedevka, Rabbi Nachman turned to everyone that was in the room and he said the following: Adayin ein atem nechshavim menashim sheli. He said, as yet, you're not yet considered my followers. This is what he said to everyone in the room. Ki yihye eis, because there will be a time Shekol ha'olam kuloi yamdu alai v'yechalku kuloi kulam alai. The whole world will stand up and they will be against me. V'yaz mi shi'eschazek v'yihye nishar etzli. But whoever supports me then and stays with me, zeh yihye nechshav be'anashim sheli be'emes. These people, those who support me then and stay with me, they will be considered as one of my true followers. So, let's try to understand this a little bit. There's a famous saying in Breslov, Basof Kulam Yihyu Breslov. In the end of days, everyone will be considered Breslov. So, Joey Rosenfeld, we've already mentioned him tonight, but he has a really beautiful explanation on this. But I'd like to suggest, if I can, my own humble understanding of what this means. So, Basof Kulam Yihyu Breslov, I'd like to say this isn't just about titles. It's about a world living with the consciousness of Breslov. And there's something very interesting about Breslov. I can speak from my own experience, and I'm sure anyone who's watching this, who considers themselves to be a follower of Rabbi Nachman, if you learn Rabbi Nachman's Torah, if you try to apply Rabbi Nachman's teachings into your life, then surely you will have come across this resistance or maybe pushback from the public. And that's often, I like to think that resistance comes from people not really understanding the truth of what Breslov really is. And in truth, deep truths provoke pushback because they challenge ego and they challenge comfort. And very often resistance reflects this longing. And if you can think about it, sometimes personally, we might have someone that we've met, and hopefully we don't feel this way because we shouldn't be judging others and we should be looking at people with nekudas tovas, looking for their good points. But sometimes it just happens where you meet a person and you dislike them for some reason. And unfortunately, if you're having that feeling, then you have to do the inner work and realize, why is it, or what is it with that person that I'm seeing in them that I don't like? And often, most cases, it's because there's something within us that's lacking and that person has that is actually missing within ourselves, but they've got it. And when we can come to terms with that and we see that mirror trait that you want in yourself, then all of a sudden those feelings disappear and you end up having a really great connection and a love for the person. So I like to think that sometimes the radical resistance that we see in Breslov comes from that. It comes from a lack of understanding of the beauty of Breslov and how Rabbi Nachman's teachings help us to gain a state of dveikut and connection with Hashem, how practical it is to try and make Hashem a part of our lives that I think many people outside of Breslov really, really don't get. And I think when Rabbi Nachman first came onto the scene and was teaching his lessons, I think initially there was already that resistance. There was that resistance from the Shpala Zeda when Rabbi Nachman passed away and Rabbi Nosson started teaching and gathering even more followers in Breslov. There was that resistance. After the Holocaust, where Breslov dwindled to such small numbers, again, to be able to create Breslov as we know it today, where you have like tens of thousands of people going to Uman for Rosh Hashanah every year, and there's Torah classes and books and sefarim and so many things coming out in the scene, there's still that state of resistance that Rabbi Nachman said that there will come a time when the world will be against him, and whoever supports him and stays with him, he'll be considered one of my true supporters. And if you think about Matan Torah itself, there's a phrase in that Shivim Panim LaTorah, there's 70 faces to the Torah. Yet, when we were all at Mount Sinai, we were all at Har Sinai getting the Torah from Hashem, we were all there, Kishachad B'Lev, we were in a state of unity and oneness and togetherness, yet we all have an equal portion in the Torah. And when you connect to a tzaddik, and that tzaddik shows you how to connect to Hashem, you're connecting with that root part of your neshama to that tzaddik that makes you feel that closeness to Hashem, and you feel that closeness to the tzaddik, and you instantly feel that closeness to Hashem because of what that tzaddik has done for your life, from the things that you're learning from them. And I'm speaking very passionately because this is how I have connected with Rabbi Nachman and what he's done for my life. And I too, in my life, as I became Breslov, faced that resistance. And when you're talking to people about Hispoidus and you tell them that, like, you can literally just go have a conversation with Hashem, which some people do, and they don't even realize that there's a platform and there's Hispoidus and there's a formula to be able to actually go and do it. But still, when you tell people that you're going out and you find a secluded place to be able to talk to Hashem, they say, well, if you receive any answers, I know a good psychiatrist. So that's been like reactions that I myself have had, and that really comes from a lack of understanding. And we need to have a lot more respect for each other when we meet Yidden that are serving Hashem in ways that fit halacha but don't necessarily follow our root neshama, but that works for them, and this is what works for someone who's Breslov, and this is what works for someone who's Satmar, and this is what works for someone who's Lubavitch, and this is their emes, and this is their path in Torah, because there's so many ways to be able to connect to Hashem and so many different avenues. And we need to remember that Hashem really runs everything, and even in that darkness, so Rabbi Nachman teaches us, Va'afilu b'hastara, b'vadei gam sham, you're going to find Hashem in those really, really dark spots. And for me, this is what Breslov has done. And even in my own life where I faced that outside resistance, I would like to still consider myself to be a follower of Rabbi Nachman, because that resistance only made me feel closer to the Rebbe. And I'm sure people listening right now, you might feel that exact same way, or you might have faced that too. And this is why I felt that today would have been a good time to be able to bring that up. And this is proof from Rabbi Nachman's challenge with the Shpala Zeda, that, as we said also last week, where you have two arguments between tzaddikim that are happening way above our level of understanding, and yet also part of that resistance is what also I'd like to say made Rabbi Nachman what he was and made the movement what it was as well. And perhaps he couldn't have done that without the pushback from the Shbala Zeta, as we said last week. Also, that brought Rabbi Nosson back to Breslov. So to conclude this little section, I think when you pour your heart out in Espoidos and you cry out to Hashem, and when you're at Rabbi Nachman's Zion, and you dance in Uman, and you recite to Ikuna Klali with fervor, or with the tens of thousands of people on Erev Rosh Hashanah, you just wish these people could comment or feel that enthusiasm that you feel as well. And I think we're really zoicha, and we're so lucky for those of us who have tasted the sweetness of Rabbi Nachman's teachings and how he brings us close to Hashem, that any teasing, any jokes, any pushback that we have, we only really feel the compassion because we've tasted that real sweetness, like a fruit. Like if you taste a fruit and you really want someone would taste it, but that for them they just like that taste just doesn't work with their palate. It's like a very, very similar thing where for you that's the sweetest thing in the world, but for them their palate, it's not something that meshes with them. And that happens also in a spiritual sense. But if people could open their eyes and see the beauty of just how to connect to Hashem from a Breslov's perspective, then I think we can reach a stage where it's Kulam Yihyu Breslov, where the whole world could really be Breslov by just talking to Hashem, being besimcha. If you're having like a down day, like being in a state of brokenheartedness for just a little amount of time, and then not falling into depression, not giving up hope. These are all amazing things that we could really apply to our everyday lives and share with the entire world. And hopefully, if the entire world would reach such a stage, we could really get to Mashiach before Tisha B'Av this year. Wouldn't that be awesome? So this paragraph finishes off and says, "Ein lanu al mi lihishayin ela al Avinu shebashamayim ki rabim kamu alav aleinu velule Hashem shahaya lanu." And then concluding this paragraph, which touches really beautifully, I think, on the point that I just made, that Rabbi Nachman really teaches us that by supporting the tzaddik, being close to the tzaddik, he brings us to closeness to Hashem. And then that's a place where we can really realize that we actually have no one to lean on except for Avinu Shebashamayim, except for Hashem. And for many have risen to rise against us. We're in a stage right now with the way that things are in the world where we're seeing that on a global level in terms of Yiddishkeit. So not only do we have to lean on each other and lean on Alam Yisrael, respect our holy brothers and sisters, and then know that we have no one but to lean on but Hashem, and He's the one who's there for us always. So that is the end of Kuf Chaf Daled. So now we're going to reach Kuf Chaf Hey, and this will bring us to the end of today's lesson. A quick point on Kuf Chaf Daled, though. There's a footnote here from the BRI that just touches on which Shabbos this lesson might have been taught at. So just for clarification, that the Shabbos that coincides with one of the 8 days of Hanukkah is called Shabbos Hanukkah. And this was one of the 3 specific times when Rabbi Nachman wanted all his followers to be with him. And when Hanukkah has 2 Shabboses, they used to gather on the second Shabbos. So this is what took place that year. The 3 times, if I am remembering correctly, is Hanukkah, Shabbos Hanukkah, Shavuos, and Rosh Hashanah. So let's move on to Kuf Chaf Hey, that's 125. Writes Reb Nosson, Shamati b'shmoi she'amar, I heard from someone else, Sha'az keshahaya b'bardishev b'kayetz Tov Kuf Samach Beis im hazaken hayadua kanal. When Rabbi Nachman was in Barditchev in the spring, or it was in the summer that year, in 5562 or 1802, it's the same time from last week where we learned that Rabbi Nachman came to visit Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, and they tried to make a cherem against the Shbala Zeta, that whole incident which took place. But Amar Az, Rabbi Nachman said at that time, Sha'az noida loy kol inyanim umahusay shel hazakain hanal. That Rabbi Menachem said that in that year of 1802, he finally understood the entire significance and character of the Shba'al Zeta, and perhaps why he was creating this big argument and pushback against Rabbi Nachman and making the claims that he was. Va'ad oisa hasha lo diber mimenu mu'uma. Until that time, he had not said any word about the Shba'al Zeta. Ki amar shaloi haya roitze ledaber mimenu klal ad asher noida loy kol inyane emuhusai. So until that time, he did not want to say a word about him because he had decided that he did not want to mention anything about the Shba'al Zeta until he fully understood the significance of his character. Only then did he begin to speak to Adam once he had finally understood a little bit more of the Shba'al Zeta's character. Then he would be able to speak about him. But yet, Rabbi Nachman spoke about the Shba'al Zeta in very, very rare intervals. I think this also touches on what we said a little bit earlier about when you're faced with a resistance from another person, or when you see another person, you what is it about that person that might be getting on my nerves or might be bothering me? And God forbid, if you have reactions to such a person like that, you have to really do the inner work and figure out, okay, what is it about that person that is hitting something within me? And clearly here, Rabbi Nachman, on a much higher spiritual level than we could attain, was doing this to try and understand what was going on within the Shba'al Zeta, perhaps trying to get a little bit more details into the Shba'al Zeta's mind and what was creating this pushback and this resistance and this public defamation, if you want to say, that the Shba'al Zeta was carrying out against Rabbi Nachman. Yet Rabbi Nachman, as we said, he chose not to speak about him that much, and only in very rare intervals, and really took on that resistance and knew that he had a spiritual enemy out there. But like he teaches us, to not get involved in arguments that are going on between tzaddikim, and that was not for us to be able to try and fully get involved. So this is, for my own limited understanding, this is a little bit of an explanation, perhaps, with and a deeper meaning into the argument between the Shba'al Zeta and Rabbi Nachman, and how we can reconcile it, and how we can reconcile any personal pushback that we might have from people trying to stop us from achieving a spiritual goal that we feel really, really connected to. If I could share a personal anecdote, when I shared with my father that I knew Breslov was my way of connecting to Hashem, and that was the spiritual path that I wanted to pursue, I'm very lucky that he shared with me that as long as you're growing in Yiddishkeit, and it's a path that you feel connected to, and it's making you more close to Hashem rather than pulling you back, he said, then you have to pursue that all the way. And that would be any message I would like to share with you, my followers, those who are listening, on whatever platform that you're hearing this. If there's a path in Yiddishkeit that you feel connected to, and if you're listening to this and it's the Breslov path, then you got to take that full on, and any sort of personal resistance or outside resistance, if you feel that that's really making you close to Hashem, then you really have to just go all in and pursue it. Know that you might face some spiritual challenges to get there, but that's all part of the process. And for us, we might not be able to know Rabbeinu's inner world, but he gave us the tools of emunah. He gave us the tools of simcha, to rejoice even in small steps. And he gave us the fire of Breslov. So keep your candle burning, even in the wind, and remember that Kulam Yihyu Breslov, that one day the world will share this consciousness, and know that Hashem is everything, and any resistance that we face now is proof of how powerful that transformative truth really, really is. So thank you all for joining this very exciting shiur. We got 3 paragraphs in. We got a lot of beautiful content. Thank you for listening to what I hope was not just a ramble, but sharing my own personal thoughts and experiences within Breslov. So I hope it gives you strength as well, just as these ideas keep me going from day to day. So wishing you all a fantastic week. God willing, we'll be back next week for finishing off this section of Chayei Moharan. So take care, everybody, and wishing you an amazing week. May Mashiach come and we'll be able to listen and do the shiur all together in Yerushalayim, because right now we are in the 9 days, and the next shiur will be just after Tisha B'Av, which would be really awesome to not have to be in a state of galus anymore. So take care, everybody, and I shall see you, Mr. Shem, next week.